Your initial reaction to the verdict?
Yeah, my initial reaction, I think, like so many of us, was a collective sigh of relief. That finally justice would be served in this case. And I think that State Attorney General Keith Ellison, former member of Congress, said it best when he said this was accountability, which reminds us that we still have a long road to go towards real justice. So many of us put the burden of every case that was not ruled in our favor on Derek Chauvin. And I think that it's reasonable to understand, but you consider that just 10 days ago, Daunte Wright was killed 10 miles from where this trial was taking place. You consider that just minutes before the verdict was even read, Ma'Khia Bryant in Columbus, Ohio, was shot and killed 3 times in the chest. A 16-year-old black girl and the officer had been on the scene apparently for 20 seconds, right? So it's really hard to even see something like the Raiders tweet where they say, "I can breathe." I understand they were referencing George Floyd's brother's comments, but we can't breathe yet. We can't breathe because Eric Garner couldn't breathe, but perhaps his video wasn't long enough. We can't breathe because Manny Ellis, from where I'm from in Washington State, was choked and held down by not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 officers. And there's still no accountability from him. That event happened last March, before George Floyd, right? And so we can't breathe. We can't relax. We can't allow this one verdict to be justice for every black life who mattered and didn't ever see justice. And perhaps the perpetrators never even saw the inside of a courtroom.
Angela, thank you for being on the show. Let me make a statement and then I'm going to ask you a question, because I want to say something to white folks out there that have a difficult time understanding where black folks are coming from when we talk about police brutality or brutality on the part of some law enforcement officials, whatever way you want to say it. Dylan Roof goes and shoots 9 people in a church in South Carolina, and he ends up arrested. Somebody walks into a supermarket in Colorado who's not black. They end up arrested after killing 10 people. But unarmed black folks find themselves dead. That is a very, very difficult thing to comprehend. And so for me, Angela, I bring this question to you. You talk about how we can't drop the ball. We got to stay on it because, again, we got the verdict. This is just one case. As far as I'm concerned, Angela, this case ain't over. The judge gets to decide how much time this guy is going to get. And that's been a focal point for me since this show started this morning. The judge gets to decide, it's a concurrent sentence because it's a state crime, not federal, so it's going to be served concurrently, not consecutively. As a result, they can go after the 40 years, which is the stiffest penalty, the stiffest charge for the second-degree unintentional murder. But still in all, the judge can sit up there and give him half that. And in the state of Minnesota, if you have no criminal record, which this officer apparently did not, you usually only serve 2/3 of your sentence, which means we're talking about 12 and a half years. We got cats dealing weed that serve more time than that. So I asked a question to you, Angela. How concerned are you, and how concerned do you think we should be as an attorney? Knowing what you know, how concerned should we be about this judge and what this judge is going to do in a case like this?
Well, Stephen, you bring up a great point, and I will tell you, most of yesterday afternoon, right after the verdict was read, I was saying the same thing, like, now we got sentencing. This sentencing hearing will be held the day after Juneteenth, which hopefully for us, knowing that was our true Emancipation Day, means something good in our favor. But I could totally understand and appreciate the tension, the unreadiness, the uneasiness, and the anxiety that you feel around sentencing. We know that black folks get stiffer penalties and stiffer sentences for far less. And I think that the reality that is before us is this is another teachable moment about how important it is for us to engage in our civic power. What am I talking about? Judges, in so many instances, are elected, right? The ways in which laws are enacted, enforced, are things that can be dictated by who we put into office. And so those are the things that we need to start taking into consideration. They ended up with a good jury. Sometimes, as you know, Stephen A., that's not always the case. Jury duty is a part of your civic power and responsibility as a registered voter. Saying all of that to say, no, we shouldn't just relax. No, we should not brush this aside. Yes, we should be highly concerned about what this judge does, in particular, because he decided to address something that Congresswoman Waters said while on the ground in Minneapolis, that people who are supporters of BLM, Black Lives Matter, and protesters should be more confrontational. For whatever reason, in the minds of some scared white folks out here, that sounds like violence. I don't understand why. Confrontation means to me to be sure and clear about where you stand, about making your demands, about ensuring that justice is in fact served. But for whatever reason, this judge in this case, the one that you're so concerned about, rightfully so, chose to bring this up to the defense team when they said that this was grounds for a mistrial, her remarks. So he said to address it on appeal, of course, not necessarily encouraging appeal, but letting them know where this could be addressed. But the fact that he would say it's inappropriate, it gives me great pause. I don't know what he'll do.
The original statement out of Minneapolis was that a man died. By the way, it's nice to see you again, Angela. And good to have you on the show. The original statement out of Minneapolis was that a man died as a result of a medical complication after a police interaction. And then we see the video of what actually happened. So the idea of mistrust from African American toward law enforcement is there's a long history there. There's also a history in this country of disenfranchising and limiting black power, both at the ballot box, obviously starting with slavery, but certainly during Reconstruction and Jim Crow and purging black people from voter rolls and all of that. But now what we also see are the following measures being taken. There's voter suppression, a law just enacted in Georgia. No, it expands voting rights, to people in rural areas. It makes it harder for people in urban areas. And there are also in these state legislatures all these anti-protest bills, where the idea is that it makes it more difficult to stage the kind of protests with the backdrop of a pandemic in this case, but to stage the kind of protests that raised awareness that probably contributed to a just verdict in this case. What are your thoughts on the kind of organized plans afoot to limit black voices and black power?
Yeah, it's a great question, and Max, it's good to see you too. The first thing I would say is addressing just the point that you raised around a man died, right? So often what we've seen in this country is that even with video, that's not good enough. There was a meme going around on social media last week that said, ain't nothing changed since Rodney King but the video quality. Right? And that's something that we really, really have to wrestle with. The fact that ain't nothing changed about oppressive state laws, local ordinances, and federal laws haven't changed much either. The fact that folks who are white supremacists, racist, having some type of implicit bias or discriminatory issue, but a part of the oppressive system, continue to find innovative and creative ways to oppress and suppress not just black power, but the power of a number of people of color and women and folks from the LGBTQIA community. That's not new either. So people are all of a sudden surprised by voter suppression efforts, but they shouldn't be, because there were these same efforts taking place right after the election of Barack Hussein Obama. Right? There were more than 140 state legislatures who tried to adopt or enacted voting rights legislation, dialing back of voting rights, ending early voting, cutting back the number of ending absentee voting, cutting back the number of early voting days, making folks have to produce voter ID. Now, it'll be a misdemeanor if you give somebody water at the polls, right? These are the kinds of things that happen when people step into their power just a little bit. Nothing has changed around protesting either. If it wasn't the law in the book, it was the baton on the back of someone's head. The person I'm thinking about right now is John Lewis, who was just fighting to ensure that Black people could vote like everyone else.
And I'll just add this. Thank goodness that Darnella Frazier stepped into her power, the 17-year-old who was threatened by Derek Chauvin, and I mentioned this at the top of the show because I don't think we would have this verdict without having that video. And you shouldn't even have to have the video to begin with, but it is what it is. Angela's sticking around here with us. So when we can return here on First Take, I also want to mention this. Jazz star Rudy Gobert shared his thoughts after the verdict. Let's hope that one day justice for all will feel normal and not like a celebration. We'll be right back.
Justice was served.